Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the 4 o'clock News and Politics Hour. Speaking of politics, the big story on GoLocal right now just broken. A heated political debate here in Rhode Island led to the firing of an employee by a national company. You can check that out on GoLocal after catching GoLocal Live, of course. And would like to welcome Jennifer Lawless from her new digs down at the University of Virginia.
Hi, how are you?
We're good, with plenty to talk about here, because I guess the big question today, it's now been a couple of days since the passing of former Senator John McCain, still continues to dominate the news cycle. Now, we talked a little bit prior to this interview, passing of Senator Ted Kennedy. Is this level of media attention to be expected? And does a little bit play into the fact of how President Donald Trump has viewed McCain throughout the years?
The amount of attention, I think, is to be expected, but only because of the current political environment. So the juxtaposition between John McCain and the manner in which he prioritized civility and Donald Trump and the way in which he seems to have no regard for it makes John McCain's passing increasingly noteworthy. The other reason that this story seems to be going on and on and on is because he had a pretty remarkable life, and the funeral festivities are going to take place over the course of a week. So there are tons of people who are speaking. There are lots of different people from both sides of the aisle who are participating, who are acting as pallbearers. And I think all of this just calls attention to the fact that McCain represents a completely different kind of Washington than the Trump administration has come to embody.
And we did see the brouhaha yesterday. The flag was half-staffed, the flag was up, the flag was back down. That only added fuel to the fire.
It did, and it just highlights that this president is incredibly petty. I mean, the fact that he had to bring the flag back down to half-mast only when veterans groups told him that he had to, or else he would basically lose their support, highlights that he just really has no sense of respect. The other thing that it highlights, I think, is that he doesn't really seem to be representing the White House or the Capitol or the country when it comes to issues like this. He's really thinking about a singular presidency and not the institution overall.
And speaking of which, comments, I believe, made today just recently, taking Google to task for what he says, only putting the bad news up top and burying the good news. Has that already been refuted?
It has been refuted, but first I'd like to note that it's pathetic to Google yourself. Now, we all do it. I do it. I'm sure you do it. You don't go around telling people you do it. And if you're the president of the United States, you certainly don't tweet about it. He shouldn't have time to do it. But to suggest that the reason that he's getting such bad news is because the Google algorithm some way is, part of this broad conspiracy that's trying to, promote fake news and take him down, is just completely ridiculous. And, the evidence for it doesn't exist. It's already been refuted. And I think it just highlights that he's willing to stop at nothing to make excuses for why 60% of the population thinks he shouldn't be in that position.
So let's talk a little bit about what a difference a week makes. Last week it was Manafort and Cohen all the time, 24/7 on the news channels. It's now crickets, at least in terms of coverage with Mueller. There's a little bit that we've been hearing, Roger Stone making some accusations about potentially Don Jr. I think the question is, where's Mueller now?
I'm not sure, and I'm not sure that we're going to know much more over the course of the next 2 months, because from Labor Day until the midterm elections, the norm and the protocol is generally to lay low when it comes to political investigations. So, I think that the timing of Manafort and Cohen last week might be the last big steps that we see prior to November. Now, the one thing that I would note, though, is that several experts over the weekend suggested that we might only be at the halfway mark. And so, given that Manafort is already apparently trying to flip a little or make a deal, suggests that there might be a lot more there and a lot more to come than we might have expected.
Did you take any look today at the coverage of Stormy Daniels and her Vogue photo shoot?
I did not. I've been unpacking. I'm sorry.
We'll leave Stormy Daniels aside. Let's talk about another issue that may or may not be being talked about inside the Beltway. The emerging details from a trade deal between the U.S. and Mexico that the president has made clear does not want to be called NAFTA.
Right. I mean, it demonstrates some degree of progress, though, because there is a deal. We are apparently not treating Mexico when it comes to trade the way that we've been treating Canada. I think maybe the president realized that we have to make nice in at least some situations. So it seems that there will be progress on that front. The specifics of the deal, we still don't know. I mean, I think from Trump's perspective, the most important thing is that he calls it something else and he says that he got rid of the crummy NAFTA deal. Even if all of the details and all of the specifics turn out to be the same, if he can rebrand it, which is basically what he has done with a lot of his businesses over time, that is seen as a success. So I think we'll know more in the coming days. But for right now, it's both a PR success for Trump and his base, but probably also not the worst thing in the world for trade.
And so it's Tuesday and there's primaries around the country. What are we keeping an eye on?
So the biggest news for tonight will be what happens in Arizona. There doesn't seem to be much question. Martha McSally will likely emerge as the primary winner in the Arizona Senate race. But she's running against Joe Arpaio, who we know from President Trump's pardon, and Kelly Ward, who is very right-wing, very conservative. She ran against John McCain in 2016 for his seat, and she actually accused the McCain family of releasing the statement saying that he was ending treatment as a way to subvert her campaign. So very, very poor taste. McSally is likely to emerge as the winner, and then that becomes a very, very hotly contested race. Kristen Sinema on the Democratic side is a competitive candidate as well, and McSally is already running some incredibly negative ads against her.
Now, we have seen McSally here. We've got the Rhode Island connection, having been at Bayview, making the comments just months ago that she said that there was some sexual abuse at the hands of a track coach, but that she had let it go and was going to be proceeding no further. It will be interesting to see, again, if she emerges from the primary moving forward, if that is brought back up. So as you said, approaching Labor Day and approaching some primaries, and obviously here in Rhode Island with an eye on the general in November, what do we expect sort of in general, Jennifer, over the next couple of months?
I mean, I think the main question is going to be how many more races move from the leaning Republican into the toss-up category. Because at this point, most people would assume that the Democrats will take back between 20 and 40 seats in the House. If that number goes up, then it means that they're not only going to have a small majority, they could actually have a governing majority. The Senate map, though, continues to look quite bad, although the latest poll out of Texas yesterday shows Ted Cruz only up 1 or 2 points over his Democratic competitor. So, you know, I think that we're going to start to see a shuffling of some of these contests, and we'll start to have a better idea of how many of these races really are competitive.
And let's just talk one thing about here in Rhode Island, Jennifer, before I let you go. Obviously, we're approaching the primaries here in September. Sort of the big debate, it's the debates. It's Governor Gina Raimondo not opting into Democratic primary debates. It's Cranston Mayor Alan Fung participating in a single radio debate at 3 o'clock on Friday before Labor Day weekend. Do people really care about this? We did hear from former Senator Chafee yesterday in support of Matt Brown. I did ask him because was in some pretty heady debates himself that probably cost him as well. I mean, does the average voter care?
Yes, not because of what is said at the debate, but the willingness to debate or to suggest that you're above debating does resonate. And that's why you always have challengers challenging incumbents to a long, long list of debates, working under the assumption that they're going to say yes to at least one. And voters are entitled to hear what the candidates actually have to say. And when a candidate refuses to debate, it's fodder for the opponent to suggest that, you know, they don't want to be straight with the public or they don't want to answer certain questions. And so again, that refusal to debate can play more into the public's opinion than the sentiments actually conveyed at that debate. And so, you know, I think it's a mistake.
Well, we'll see moving forward the impact of the, again, refusal by the governor and, again, the one debate by Cranston Mayor Alan Fung. This weekend coming up, Labor Day weekend, hopefully we'll have the chance to catch you back here next Tuesday.
Absolutely.
Okay, Jennifer Lawless down at UVA. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, don't go anywhere. I'll be right back here with our next guest. Thanks, Jennifer. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in for the 4 o'clock show. I'd like to thank Jennifer Lawless down at UVA Talking Politics. I'd like to get a little more local here about a timely issue. So Kayla David, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I appreciate your coming in from the Family Service of Rhode Island to talk about a topic that is year-round, but as kids head back to school and families get kids ready, obviously we saw several tragedies already this week. The big one obviously in Florida at the esports gaming tournament. A troubled young man took the lives of others and himself. So wanted to talk mental health as we head back to school, all ages, from the younger ones to especially middle school and high school, because some anxiety is normal, but sort of when to be concerned about a child, when to have discussions with a child, and when to seek help for a child.
So I think one of the important things to note is that most kids are a little bit nervous. That's pretty typical. And then I think with our current dynamics in the last year or so and the amount of school shootings and how broadcasted those are and how easily accessible that information is to kids, that we're seeing even more anxiety about going back to school from both parents and kids. So it's really important to know that you are probably feeling anxiety as a parent and that your kid's probably feeling a little bit of anxiety as they're kind of going back to school. That's typical, and kind of typical anxiety about anything from the first day of school to tests. That is really normal, and that anxiety actually helps us succeed in life. We want to be nervous about a test because then we study for it. When we notice that there's a problem is that it's impairing a child's functioning. So they're not getting up to go to school, or it's been a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and you are dragging them kicking and screaming to the bus stop because they're so nervous about going to school. Or if you're noticing that their functioning at home or in the community just isn't what it normally is, or they're reporting that they're having anxiety attacks or panic attacks, trouble breathing. You know, the first thing we want to do is bring them to the doctors, but those also might be signs of of anxiety.
And so is that the place to start? If you've got a family physician you see for annuals or maybe when they have colds, do you start there or do you go right to the mental health professionals?
It really depends. You have the option to do either. Most of the doctors can give you a referral for a mental health counselor that they're connected with, that they know that maybe other patients have had good experience with. But you can also go directly to a mental health treatment center, or you can go to an individual therapist that might be doing private practice and call them, and they'll do a phone screening or an intake where they're asking some specific questions about current symptoms that your child's experiencing, and they're kind of setting up maybe a plan for what type of treatment might be the best option for you.
And what if you have a child, a student, middle school, high school ages, adults, it's tough for anyone to sort of wrap their brain around that they might be having problems, but for a child who might be hesitant to see someone that might say, oh, well, I'm not crazy, like I don't need to see someone. How do you suggest parents broach in that sense of we're here to help and here's how we're going to help you if they sense some reticence from their kids?
So one of the important things is if you're noticing changes in mood, sleep, appetite, if you're noticing that they're giving away stuff or they're becoming really irritable or that they're isolating, those are kind of behaviors that you can start pointing out. And I always tell parents to come from a place of concern. I'm concerned about you and your safety, and then ask direct questions. If you're nervous about a child that's maybe they're really anxious about school, you're asking directly, are you really nervous about going to school? Do you get nervous during the day? If you're nervous that your child might be experiencing something like depression or is at risk for suicide, it's not going to hurt that child to say, are you thinking about suicide? I've noticed all of these things. I'm really concerned about you and I want to get you the help that you need. And I think it's also important, I'll go with you, right? When it's a child or an adolescent seeking treatment, the parent should be involved in the treatment. And then the therapist and the child and yourself as a parent will determine the best course of treatment moving forward. But the first session, you can certainly say, I'm going to come with you, I'm going to help them kind of see, or I'm going to tell them what I'm noticing, and we're going to figure out how to best help you. And this is to help. It's not to say that you're crazy. Everyone experiences really difficult things in a different way, and we want to get you the skills that you need to be able to handle all of these difficult things that you're going through.
Do you think, it's been a few years now, and I don't know if the same cohort of kids is watching it, but that show, 13 Reasons Why, Did that increase the dialogue about mental health amongst kids and just make it more of a reality? What was the role of that? I mean, I think back, you're slightly younger than I am, but that was certainly not something that was around when I was a teen. How has that entered the dialogue with kids, as you said, being able to access both information online about what's happening in terms of casualties around the country, but of course now we're seeing even in the entertainment business and tackling the issue as well.
Yeah. So I think one of the important things is I tell almost every adolescent that comes in to see me has watched 13 Reasons Why. So it is a very popular TV show. I encourage parents to watch with their kids, to have dialogue about it, because it is really sensationalized, and some of those experiences that are happening throughout the show that you can now binge watch, which kind of makes it a little bit more concerning.
Okay.
Are about sexual abuse. They are about suicide. They are about really difficult traumatic events in people's lives. And we as parents need to be responsible for starting conversations and providing accurate information to our kids. So if you're watching it together, you can kind of pause it and say, hey, let's talk a little bit more about this, or let's look up something together. And then be aware, if your child has experienced traumatic events, it might be really triggering, even if they want to watch that show, to watch it, and so you should be available to talk about that if that's something that they're watching.
And how involved and what age, and I've talked with professionals about this before, but it's always a good sort of refresher, especially the world of social media.
Yeah.
And a lot of times kids are kids, they want to be private, they don't want mom and dad to be privy to their conversations at the middle school and high school level. But if there's something of concern, if there's concern for bullying, if there's on either side, if their child's being bullied or might be engaging in bullying behaviors, what do you advise parents in terms of their social media monitoring as far as their kids are concerned?
So I think starting from a really early age, having boundaries and perimeters around social media. So if you come to your kid today and you've never set any boundaries around it, and you say, I'm going to be looking at it, you have to open it to me, you have to give me your password.
Might be tough.
You might have a really difficult interaction. But if you start really young around kind of limiting media exposure, around kind of appropriate use of the internet, and you're doing internet safety at an early age, then it should be a much easier conversation to say, or it might never be a conversation because you've always been a friend on their social media page, or they've always known that you're going to have their passwords. I think family to family, as parents, we have to determine if we want our children to have access to that and how early we do. And then reading on literature about how much media exposure from TV to social media to cell phones that kids are having and how that impacts kind of brain development. And then making choices for you and your child. But the earlier that we have those conversations, the better off we are, and the less of a head-on collision we might have with our kid when we're trying to have that conversation at 15 or 16.
Because it clearly varies across families and parenting styles, and as you said, having the conversation early, screen time, whether that be laptop, whether that be phone. Obviously, there's a number of kids who are going to take whatever their device is and go under their sheets, and it might not get much sleep because we know these young folks like to stay up late and have these conversations with the fear that maybe they'll miss out on some conversation at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then obviously viewing the parents as the bad guy if they can't have their device with them at all times. Again, does that just go back to having those conversations at the younger age? Is limiting screen time important?
I believe that limiting screen time is important, and really being cognizant that it's not just TV. I mean, it's not just your laptop and your phone, it's also the TV. And we know that it actually impacts kids' sleep, that if we're viewing, or any of our sleep, if we're viewing LED lights, that is telling our brain to stay awake. So being really careful about removing them earlier or doing something after dinner that's not watching the TV or being on a cell phone. And an important thing is, as parents, we have the opportunity to model that. So we can't ask our kids to not be on their phones if we've spent the whole day on our cell phones. So we have to take a step and really look at how we're operating in terms of our screen time to be able to model appropriate screen time for youth. And then just having the conversation earlier and earlier about internet safety, about bullying, about cyberbullying, so that, that's just a normal conversation that you're having as a family, and that they're well aware when someone comes up to them like maybe a therapist if they're coming in for treatment and says, let's talk about internet safety, that they know it all already. That's the kind of the hope of any parent, is that we provided them with the information they need in order to stay safe, because the internet has really great things to offer our kids, but we want to make sure that they're being safe and that we're taking the responsibility of saying this is appropriate or this isn't appropriate for you.
The kids, I mean, when they get to that high school level, I mean, the middle school might be tough, but it's like anything else, you know, the parent says no more sugar cereal and they really want it. This is the sugar, this is the hit. We know that this sort of instant gratification is like, oh my God, I need this, I want this, this is my screen. You're taking it away from me, you're such a meanie, like I hate you. But because their brains aren't fully formed, do they actually comprehend if a parent tried to explain it to them why it's not good to be on? Or do you just have to be the parent and be like, I'm the parent, you're the child, here's the rule?
So I think a little bit of both. No matter what, our kids are going to hate us at some point in time, but they're going to say it. And so know that they don't hate us. They might be saying that, but it might be out of anger, and a lot of us say things out of anger that we don't mean. I think it's important to have the conversation when a kid is not already escalated. So if you're about to take away that cell phone and they are screaming, it's not the time to have a conversation on why it might be helpful to their brain to
It's on the parent. Yeah, give me the phone.
Yeah, and again, if it's set up that this has always been a thing, then it'll be really normalized for them, versus you're now in high school, you've had this phone, and I've let you sleep with it underneath your pillow, and now I'm going to ask for it at 7. That's it's a much different conversation. It might be much more difficult. It might be worth having, but it's much more difficult.
What do you say, especially to those kids? It's difficult, obviously, to find if a student's being bullied, but if you find your student is the bully, how to have those conversations with your kid?
So I think it's important to know that, oftentimes when kids are lashing out, that there's something going on for them internally. So being really mindful and trying to have conversations about feelings. That oftentimes we see that when kids don't have the ability to express how they're feeling, or they feel like they can't express how they're feeling. And again, it's the same sort of thing around getting kind of help. We might need help in order for you to learn new skills to manage these really tough emotions. And oftentimes, kids are feeling something different, and the bullying is kind of a symptom of that bigger experience for them. But we should be able to we should be having conversations about what bullying is, about what cyberbullying is with our kids, whether we know that there's bullying going on or not, because they could be breaking laws by participating in cyberbullying, and oftentimes they're not aware of that until something really difficult has happened. And that might be their first introduction into kind of the laws around cyberbullying and their discrimination and bullying policies at their school.
Well, I just wanted you to come in again. And some kids are already back at school. Some kids are heading back to school next week. But as always, just sort of what to think about as it concerns your child's mental health. Anything we didn't touch upon besides the resources available at Family Service of Rhode Island?
So that's really important. You can always give us a call if you're looking for services. You can call our direct line at 331-1350. That's a 401 area code. And you can also find us on www.familyserviceri.org. And we also have a wealth of information on there for parents, and we are always willing to talk to you if there's things that are going on that you're not sure if this fits coming in for mental health treatment. And I think the most important thing is really modeling for our kids. If I feel anxious as a parent, modeling going to a therapist is an okay thing to do, and that it helps. So that's the most important thing, is to really model what you're asking your child to do.
Well, Kayla, I appreciate your taking the time to come in here to the studio. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back to wrap up here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning into the 4 o'clock news and politics show. Appreciate Jennifer Lawless Skyping in from the University of Virginia to talk about the latest, including the coverage of the passing of Senator John McCain, where things might stand or not with the Mueller investigation with the elections approaching, and what to expect over the next couple of months as the battle is on for control of Congress. I would also like to thank Kayla David with Family Service of Rhode Island to come in light of kids going back to school and a couple of events recently, including the shooting at the esports tournament, and talking with kids about mental health, signs to look for, and resources here in Rhode Island that can enable kids and families to seek help if needed. So I want to just thank again Family Service of Rhode Island for taking the time to come in. If you missed her at 3 o'clock, Rachel Nunes was up with 4 full guests. The big story just broken on GoLocal. A Facebook argument here in Rhode Island went to the level of a national employer firing an employee for what was put on Facebook in the course of the argument. GoLocal has all of that on golocalprov.com. Be sure to tune in to GoLocal on Facebook throughout the evening, our website, and of course we'll be back here in studio tomorrow. We'll have Laura Afonso talking all things food and fun. I'll be back at 4 o'clock. We look forward to seeing you here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel.